Picture this scene clearly in your mind. It happened roughly 50,000 years ago. Somewhere in the region we now call southern France, the bright sun is dropping fast behind a ridge of limestone cliffs. This sunset paints everything the deep color of a dying campfire. A young woman is sitting right near a fire. Let us just call her an ancient woman, because that is exactly what she is. She is definitely not a cave woman. She is not a grunting cartoon sketch from an old textbook that nobody fact-checked. Instead, she is carefully working a piece of hard flint into a sharp blade. Her hands move incredibly fast. They look highly practiced. She actually seems almost bored with how easy this task is for her. The ancient stonework is just second nature to her now. Sitting directly across from her sits a man she has known for a very long time. They have known each other since they were both young children. They used to run around the camp together. They always got underfoot back then. He is, and I cannot stress this enough, completely terrible at making tools. He is genuinely and almost impressively bad at this essential skill. Every single blade he produces looks like it lost a violent fight with a hungry hyena. Then it got finished off by an angry badger for good measure. Every single time, without fail, she gently takes the ruined tool out of his clumsy hands. She fixes it in about 4 seconds without saying a single word. She then hands it right back to him calmly, like nothing happened. He grins broadly, like he just won something valuable. She does not smile back at him. However, she also does not look away quite as fast as she used to do in the past. If you had been sitting right at that fire with them, you would have noticed that small detail too. It was a very quiet moment shared between two people in a wild world. Now, here is the big question that is going to ruin your week in the best possible way. Was that simple interaction a genuine moment of true love? Or was it just two ancient humans doing exactly what evolution programmed them to do? Were these two biological gears simply clicking into place because the survival machine needed them to do so? Did they have zero actual feelings? That deep question is the main point of this entire video. Did ancient humans actually fall in love? Or is love just a shiny modern invention? Did we slap this concept onto a much colder and more transactional biological process? Stick around, because the real answer is much messier. It is weirder and honestly far more touching than you would ever expect from our ancient ancestors. Remember, this is a unique species that also used to crack bone marrow out of dead animals. They used heavy rocks as their only kitchen appliance. Let us get the biggest myth out of the way immediately. It is standing directly between you and the absolute truth. Ancient humans were not knuckle-dragging brutes. They did not club a partner over the head to drag them home. That false image comes from very outdated cartoons and lazy textbook illustrations. It also comes from an entire century of scientists who simply were not asking the right questions. It is not real. It was never real at any point in history. Ancient humans actually had brains that were nearly the exact same size as our brains today. They lived very complex lives every day. They created intricate social structures and used layered communication. They had tool-making traditions that were carefully passed down across many generations. Now, here is the part that everyone always skips over. They had fully functional emotional lives. They experienced deep fear, grief, joy, jealousy, and attachment. Their minds were capable of feeling complex things just like we do in modern times. If you somehow compared a 50,000-year-old human brain to a modern one, you would see similarities. Neurologically speaking, you are not looking at two different species of feeling. You are looking at the exact same hardware. It was just running on a much harsher operating environment. They had to deal with constant danger and extreme survival challenges every day of their lives. So, if the internal hardware for emotion was already sitting there fully installed, what is the real mystery? The real question is not whether ancient humans could feel something resembling love. The true question is, did the conditions actually exist for that feeling to matter? Did it shape their daily behavior? Did it leave a lasting mark on their world that we can see today? That is where this topic gets genuinely interesting. Love, biologically speaking, is not some mystical force. It does not just drift down from the heavens to land conveniently on two people sitting at a campfire. It is actually chemistry. It is specific, traceable, and ancient chemistry. This science predates humans by an embarrassingly long stretch of evolutionary time. It has been around for a while. Let us talk about oxytocin right now. It is the unsung hero of this entire story. Nobody gives this tiny hormone nearly enough credit. Oxytocin is a powerful hormone that surges during mammalian bonding. It floods the system when a mother nurses her young child. It activates when a couple cuddles after a long day. It happens when you hug an old friend tightly. You feel something warm settle deep in your chest. This is not a modern human invention. It is not even a primate invention. Oxytocin is ancient in the most literal sense. It shows up across various mammals, stretching back tens of millions of years. This happened long before the first human ever existed on Earth. Evolution perfected this chemical process a very long time ago. Prairie voles are glamorous little creatures that became scientifically famous for a special reason. They form lifelong pair bonds almost entirely thanks to oxytocin. They also rely on a related hormone called vasopressin. Meanwhile, their close cousins, the meadow voles, have slightly different receptor wiring in their brains. They are essentially the commitment-phobic party animals of the rodent world. They move constantly. They go from partner to partner with zero emotional attachment whatsoever. It is the same basic chemical, but with different internal wiring. This creates wildly and dramatically different relationship outcomes. Why does any of that matter for ancient humans? It matters because we inherited that exact same chemical toolkit. It was fully intact, with no major modifications required for our species to use it. When two ancient humans sat close together at a warm fire, their brains reacted. When they touched or cared for each other's children, chemistry happened. When they tended to each other's painful wounds, their brains were flooding with bonding chemicals. This is the same chemistry that makes you feel warm and a little stupid today when you are wrapped up with someone you care about. The essential hardware for emotional attachment did not show up alongside romantic poetry. It did not appear with gold wedding rings. It was sitting there in our biology millions of years before those things were even conceptually possible. But chemistry alone does not fully prove the existence of love. We definitely have to be completely honest about that fact as we look at evidence. A dog's brain releases oxytocin when you scratch behind its hairy ears. Yet, nobody is writing famous sonnets about that particular relationship. Well, some people probably are doing that. But that is a different and much weirder video for another day. So, let us go much further into the past. Let us look at what ancient humans actually did during their lives on Earth. We must examine the physical evidence they left scattered deep across the ancient dirt. Bones do not lie. They tell the truth, even if they are frustratingly stingy with the specific details. In the year 2007, dedicated archaeologists were working in Mantua, Italy. They uncovered a Neolithic-era burial. The internet immediately and somewhat dramatically nicknamed this discovery the Lovers of Valdaro. It went viral. They found two skeletons lying face to face. Their arms were wrapped tightly around each other. They were buried together roughly 5,000 years ago. They were never separated by time. They were not even separated by death itself. Not even several thousand years of heavy dirt settling on top of them could pull them apart. People completely lost their minds over this amazing archaeological discovery. Honestly, that reaction is fair enough. It is the kind of powerful image that punches you right in the chest. You feel it even through a television screen decades later. Now, that particular burial sits a bit later in history than the deep ancient era we usually talk about. But here is the important part. It is absolutely not an isolated incident in archaeology. Embracing burials and double burials show up constantly. Bodies positioned with clear and deliberate tenderness appear again and again across ancient human sites. This stretches back tens of thousands of years before the Valdaro lovers ever existed. Someone in nearly every era of human existence decided a body deserved care. They dug deep graves with obvious intention and deep respect for the dead. That behavior is not just instinct running on autopilot. Cold instinct does not carefully fold someone's arms around another cold body. Instinct does not dig a grave deep enough and wide enough for two people. It does not arrange them precisely. Then we have Shanidar Cave, located in Iraq. This site has become something close to legendary in archaeology circles for very good reason. Neanderthal remains were discovered deep inside that cave. Yes, Neanderthals absolutely count in this discussion. They are part of our extended ancient human family tree. We overlapped with them for tens of thousands of years. We even had children with them. That makes for an awkward family reunion joke. However, it is also just straightforwardly true according to modern genetic science and skeletal studies. One particular burial is often called the flower burial. It was originally interpreted as a Neanderthal laid to rest surrounded by clusters of colorful flowers. That beautiful interpretation has been debated heavily for decades by top researchers. Some scientists suggest the pollen found in the soil could have come from ancient burrowing rodents. These animals dragged plant material into the cave over time. But here is what often gets completely lost in that specific scientific debate. Even if we set the literal flowers aside entirely, the burial still shows something special. It shows deliberate and careful treatment of the dead. These bodies were positioned with clear intention. Some individuals were even returned to and revisited over time. They were not forgotten by their ancient groups after they died. Something at Shanidar mattered deeply to those ancient people. They did not simply abandon their dead friends. They did not let the cave do whatever caves do to bodies left unattended. Why does burial matter for a video specifically about romantic love? Why not just general human decency? It matters because burial is grief's fingerprint pressed permanently into the hard archaeological record for us. You do not carefully and deliberately bury someone you feel absolutely nothing for. Grief is essentially just love, with nowhere left to go. The archaeological record is absolutely littered with clear evidence of ancient grief. This means, by direct extension, it is also littered with evidence of ancient love. You logically cannot have one of these intense emotions without the other existing first in life. If people felt loss this intensely and consistently across tens of thousands of years, they felt connection too. They must have felt that connection just as intensely before the tragic loss ever happened. Now, let us talk about the more uncomfortable side of this topic. Love stories were never all soft lighting and tearful reunions. Sometimes they come wrapped in terrible violence, jealousy, and tragedy. Ancient humans were not exempt from any of those dark things either. There is clear fossil evidence available. We have actual documented skeletal trauma. Some researchers have interpreted this trauma as resulting from conflict specifically over mates. We see cracked skulls and defensive wounds along forearms. We see healed fractures that are more consistent with interpersonal violence than with hunting accidents or animal attacks. I want to be very careful here. Attributing every single ancient injury to romance is lazy. Saying they obviously fought over a woman is just overly dramatic storytelling. That gives anthropology a bad reputation among serious researchers. Most violence in the ancient record was almost certainly rooted in competition over vital resources. They fought over food, territory, and social status within their small groups. But jealousy as a raw emotion is deeply rooted in primate behavior. It is observed consistently in chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas. It is seen in basically every social mammal scientists have studied closely. It would honestly be much stranger if ancient humans were somehow the one exception to this rule. Jealousy is love's annoying, overprotective, and occasionally violent cousin. It always tags along with attachment. If the warm and fuzzy bonding chemistry existed, the uglier instincts came along too. They were uninvited, but entirely unavoidable in a harsh world. Here is where this topic gets genuinely fascinating from an evolutionary biology standpoint. I promise this goes somewhere worthwhile for our understanding. Humans are frankly very weird among primates when it comes to forming relationships. We are unusual. Most primates do not pair bond at all. Chimpanzees have multiple partners and no lasting emotional attachment. They show minimal direct co-parenting between a father and a specific child. Bonobos are famously and almost cheerfully promiscuous creatures. They use physical intimacy as a social tool to diffuse tension. They use it to smooth over arguments and apologize for stealing someone's sweet fruit. But humans developed something noticeably different along our specific evolutionary branch. Long-term pair bonding shows up across a huge percentage of human societies throughout history. It appears across nearly every inhabited continent on Earth. Why did this happen to us specifically? The leading scientific theory comes down somewhat unglamorously to our babies. Human infants were, and still are, spectacularly helpless compared to primates. A baby chimpanzee can cling tightly to its mother's thick fur within hours of being born. It is basically ready to ride along immediately. A human baby cannot even hold its own head up reliably for several months. Human infants take many years to become even remotely self-sufficient. That uniquely long childhood meant ancient mothers needed serious, sustained, and reliable help over a long time. Enter the concept of pair bonding. This brought a partner who sticks around through tough times. This partner helps gather food during the exhausting early months of a child's life. They protect a vulnerable child from danger. They share the brutal and relentless workload of keeping a helpless human alive. They did this in a world full of dangerous predators and freezing winters. They also faced wildly unpredictable food supplies every season. Having that dedicated partner was a measurable survival advantage for our ancestors. Evolution does not care about feelings directly as a rule. However, it absolutely and ruthlessly cares about survival outcomes. Pair bonding consistently produced much better survival outcomes for human offspring. Natural selection essentially built the emotional infrastructure for what we call love today. The alternative was random, fleeting, and uncommitted connections. Those types of relationships left far too many ancient babies without enough sustained support. They could not make it through their first few brutal years of life. So, here is the slightly less romantic but genuinely beautiful twist hiding inside all this cold biology. Love might have started as a basic survival tool for our ancient species. It did not start with poetry or destiny. It was a tool, plain and simple. It was shaped by relentless evolutionary pressure over countless generations. But here is the amazing thing about tools. Once a species has them, they almost always get used for far more than their original purpose. A hammer was built to drive nails. Eventually, somebody picked one up to make art instead. The exact same thing happened with pair bonding. What started as a biological strategy for keeping helpless infants alive became something more. It became the emotional architecture for true companionship, comfort, and shared humor. It allowed for private inside jokes and mutual grief. Yes, it created love in every sense we would instantly recognize today. The underlying mechanism might be coldly evolutionary in nature. However, the actual experience riding on top of that mechanism is unmistakably and achingly human. Ancient humans left clear evidence of that lived experience in places beyond just quiet graves. They left it in their beautiful art too. This might be the most compelling clue of all. Consider the famous Venus figurines. These are small carved statuettes depicting women found scattered across Europe. Some of these unique figurines date back more than 25,000 years. They get a huge amount of attention for their exaggerated body proportions. Researchers have debated their exact meaning for well over a century now, without full agreement. Some think they are fertility symbols. Others think they are self-portraits carved by women looking down at their own bodies. This explains the unusual artistic proportions. Some think they are spiritual icons. Nobody has landed on a single universally accepted answer yet. But what is far less debated is the fact that ancient humans were spending serious time on them. They used considerable skill and limited resources to craft these detailed representations of the human body. They did this with obvious care across thousands of years and miles of geography. That is simply not the behavior of a species that viewed each other as disposable. You do not carve something that carefully and repeatedly, unless it means something to you. You do not pass this tradition down across many generations unless the human form matters. The actual humans wearing that form held significant value to the artists. Cave art adds yet another fascinating layer to this big picture. Most cave art focuses heavily on wild animals. We see majestic bison, fast horses, and deer. These were essentially the greatest hits of the ancient food chain. They were rendered beautifully in red ochre and dark charcoal. But human figures do appear throughout the record too. Sometimes they are in pairs. Sometimes they are in configurations that look suspiciously like scenes of emotional connection. They do not look like pure hunting or survival documentation. We do have to be careful here. We must not wildly over-romanticize blurry handprints and faded outlines on a cold cave wall. Some of these are 40,000 years old, but the simple impulse to create art at all is meaningful. They deliberately spent scarce time and energy on something with zero direct caloric value. This artistic expression had no immediate survival value. Therefore, it is a very meaningful clue for scientists. Art is what brains do when they finally have spare capacity left over. It happens after handling pure survival needs. A brain with spare capacity left over for art almost certainly had spare capacity for love as well. They had time to feel and express deep emotions. Let us circle right back to chemistry one final time. There is a piece of this puzzle that almost never gets discussed in popular videos. That piece is dopamine. Oxytocin handles long-term bonding, trust, and the calm feeling of attachment. But dopamine handles the obsessive phase of early romantic attraction. It causes that feeling of can't stop thinking about them. It creates butterflies in your stomach. Studies on modern humans navigating the early stages of romantic love show interesting results. Their brain activity is strikingly and measurably similar to the brain activity observed in addiction. This is not just metaphorically similar, it is actually and literally similar. It lights up the exact same reward pathways in the human brain. This system is ancient. It evolved long before humans ever existed on Earth. It is the exact same reward system that motivates any animal to pursue something beneficial. It drives them toward food, safety, and social bonds worth keeping. Ancient humans falling for someone experienced something powerful. Neurologically speaking, it was indistinguishable from what you feel today. It is like scrolling back to reread a message from someone you are really into. The feeling is identical. Except instead of looking at a modern phone screen, it was probably someone's face across a campfire. That face was lit up orange by the flames. It was a face glanced at a little too long in the dark. Which brings us right back to our two ancient humans from the very beginning of our story. We see the woman fixing the consistently terrible flint blades. We also see the man who apparently never once improved at his actual job. It did not matter how many chances and corrections he received from her. Strip away the ancient fire pit and the stone flint napping. Strip away the heavy animal hides draped across their shoulders. You are left with a scene that is almost insultingly familiar to anyone alive today. It happens everywhere. You see someone who is bad at something doing it anyway. They just want an excuse to sit a little closer to someone special. You see someone fixing the mistake without complaint every single time. They do this because some part of them quietly liked having a reason to be needed. That sweet dynamic is not unique to 50,000 years ago. It still plays out today. It is playing out in modern office break rooms and in busy group chats right now. It happens in someone's badly attempted dinner tonight, somewhere in the world. The setting changed completely over time. The underlying biological wiring did not change at all. Now, skeptics will point out a flaw. There are plenty of good and careful skeptics in anthropology. Skepticism is genuinely healthy here. They will point out that we are projecting modern emotional concepts onto ancient behavior. We are looking at actions we cannot directly observe or interview anyone about today. Honestly, that is a fair and necessary caution to raise. We will never find a 50,000-year-old diary entry confessing true love. We cannot sit down a Neanderthal and ask them about their deepest feelings. Every single conclusion built here comes from indirect evidence. We look at burials and shared brain chemistry. We see traits inherited across millions of years of evolution. We use comparative animal behavior and careful, honest inference. Science does not deal in absolute certainty about ancient emotional inner lives. Any video claiming total certainty here is simply selling you something that is not true. But here is the counterpoint to that skepticism. It is a genuinely strong argument. If we are not allowed to assume ancient humans loved without direct proof, we should not assume they did not either. This is especially true when nearly every measurable biological signal points firmly toward yes. They loved in some recognizable form. The burden of proof runs in both directions here. Right now, the available evidence leans heavily toward connection rather than coldness. We see careful and deliberate burials. We share bonding chemistry inherited across tens of millions of years. Our reproductive strategy is literally built around sustained partnership. We find art depicting the human form with obvious care. Jealousy, grief, and attachment are consistently present wherever researchers look closely enough at the data. At some point, the absence of a written love letter stops being meaningful evidence. It starts looking far more like the natural limits of history. Fossils and ancient dirt can only physically preserve so much over time. There is also something worth sitting with here. Think about what this all means for us today as we live our modern lives. We spend time scrolling through dating apps. We are constantly overthinking unanswered text messages. We quietly wonder if any of this modern romantic chaos even means anything. We wonder about its place in the grand scheme of the universe. It does mean something. It is not new. This is not some flimsy invention sitting precariously on top of biology. It is the biology itself. The systems are exactly the same. The same systems made an ancient man clumsily keep ruining flint blades. He did it just to sit closer to someone. These are the exact same systems lighting up in your brain right now. They activate over someone who probably does not even fully realize their effect on you. You are not running some separate modern emotional operating system today. You match the ancient people. They painted bison on cave walls. They buried their dead wrapped tightly in each other's arms. You are running the same system they used. You just have significantly better lighting and far more distractions. You also have noticeably worse patience. So, did ancient humans actually fall in love? Based on everything we can currently measure and observe, the answer lands very close to yes. Ancient history is never going to honestly give us total certainty. But the chemistry, the burials, the art, and the evolutionary logic all point to it. This was not necessarily the greeting card version of love. There were no roses or vows recited aloud. There were no anniversaries marked on a calendar. But it was something real. It was something that mattered deeply. It shaped how they buried their dead. It changed how they raised vulnerable children. It influenced how they survived brutal winters together rather than scattered and alone. It looks an awful lot like what you are feeling right now. It matches your feelings about somebody specific, even if you would never admit that out loud to anyone. That is the beautiful truth of it. Maybe that is the most oddly comforting thing buried inside all of ancient history. Strip away the modern technology, strip away language as we know it today, strip away every single comfort separating right now from 50,000 years ago. You still end up with two people sitting close to a fire. They are terrible at flint knapping and terrible at saying how they feel. Somehow they face every brutal odd. They face everything an unforgiving ancient world could throw at them, yet they choose to stay close anyway. They do this night after night, fire after fire. If this kind of deep dive into the emotional lives of ancient humans is your thing, there is a lot more buried in this same direction for us to explore. We can look into ancient grief rituals and ancient friendship. We can even explore ancient humor, believe it or not. It existed back then too. So stick around because this particular rabbit hole goes a lot deeper than one fire. It goes much further than one badly made blade. There are many more stories waiting to be told about our fascinating ancestors.